My name is Henry Blackwood, and 3 days before my wedding, my father made a decision that changed our relationship forever. The strange part is that he probably thought he was keeping the peace. Instead, he showed me exactly where I stood. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was alone in my workshop, putting the final coat of finish on a walnut dining table. The smell of fresh wood filled the room, and an old country song played softly through a dusty radio sitting on a shelf above my workbench. Life felt good. For the first time in a long time, everything seemed to be falling into place. In 72 hours, I was going to marry the woman I loved. Then my phone lit up. Dad. I smiled when I answered. By the end of the call, I wished I hadn't. Hey, Dad. His voice sounded different. Careful. Measured. Like someone rehearsing bad news. Henry? I need to talk to you. I stopped working immediately. What happened? A pause. Then he said something I never expected to hear. I won't be at the wedding. For a moment, I genuinely thought he was joking. What? I won't be coming. The workshop suddenly felt very quiet. I set down my brush. Why? Another pause. Then came the answer. Ethan needs us right now. Of course. My older brother. The answer was so predictable it almost made me laugh. Almost. My father continued. He's having a difficult time. Dad, it's my wedding. I know. 3 days from now. I know. And you're not coming because Ethan is having a difficult time? It's complicated. No, it wasn't. That was the problem. It was painfully simple. My father had spent my entire life choosing Ethan. This was just the first time he had done it in a way that nobody could ignore. After we hung up, I sat alone in my workshop for nearly 20 minutes. Not angry, not shocked, just tired. Because the truth was, this wasn't really about the wedding. The wedding was only the latest chapter in a story that had started decades earlier. Growing up, Ethan was the center of everything. He was 4 years older than me, confident, popular, athletic, the kind of kid adults immediately noticed when he walked into a room. I was different. Quiet, creative, more comfortable building things than talking about them. When Ethan scored a winning touchdown in high school, my parents hosted a celebration dinner. When I won a regional woodworking competition a year later, Dad shook my hand and said, "Nice work, son." That was it. No dinner, no celebration, no photos. Just 2 words before he changed the subject. I remember another moment even more clearly. I was 12 years old. I'd spent an entire summer building a treehouse in our backyard. Every board, every nail, every crooked measurement. I did it myself. The day I finished, I couldn't wait to show Dad. He promised he'd come look after work. I waited for hours. When his truck finally pulled into the driveway, I ran outside. "Dad, come see it." Before he could answer, Ethan's car pulled in. He had just received a college acceptance letter from his first-choice university. Within seconds, everyone was talking about Ethan. Mom was crying, Dad was hugging him, neighbors were being called. The treehouse sat behind me, completely forgotten. A week later, Dad finally climbed up to look at it. By then, it didn't matter anymore. That was how things worked in our family. Nobody meant to hurt me. At least, I don't think they did. Ethan simply had a way of becoming the priority, and Dad always found it easier to follow that gravity than fight against it. The day after the phone call, my fiancée found me sitting in the workshop staring at absolutely nothing. She didn't ask questions right away. She simply sat beside me. Eventually, I told her everything. When I finished, she squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" I shrugged. "What can I do?" She thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "You know, someone else has been acting like your father for years." I looked at her. I knew exactly who she meant. Walter Hayes. I met Walter 3 years earlier through his son, Daniel. At first, he was just my friend's dad.
Then he became the man who showed up for everything. When my truck broke down, Walter appeared with tools. When my business struggled during its first year, Walter spent weekends helping me renovate a new workshop. When I got engaged, he hugged me before I even finished telling him. The relationship happened so naturally that I never stopped to think about what it meant. Until now.
The next morning, I drove to Walter's house. He lived near the river in a small white home with a workshop behind it. I found him repairing an old rocking chair. He smiled when he saw me. "Morning, kid." Then he saw my face. The smile faded. "What's wrong?" I told him. Everything. The wedding, Dad, Ethan, all of it. Walter listened without interrupting. When I finished, he quietly set down his tools. "When do you need me?" I blinked. "For what?" He looked genuinely confused. "For the wedding." I stared at him. "You'd do that?" "Henry." He shook his head. "I'd be honored." Those 4 words hit harder than anything my father had said in years. I'd be honored. Not obligated. Not willing. Honored. By Thursday afternoon, Ethan called. I wasn't surprised. News traveled quickly in our family. "I heard you're bringing Walter." I leaned back in my chair. "Yes. You know Dad feels bad." That almost made me laugh. Dad feels bad. You're making this harder than it needs to be. There it was. The same mindset that had shaped our family for decades. Anything that challenged Ethan's comfort automatically became somebody else's problem. "No, Ethan," I said calmly. "What's making this hard is that Dad chose not to come." For once, he didn't have an answer. We ended the call shortly afterward. The conversation confirmed something I'd been realizing all week. Ethan wasn't responsible for every decision Dad made, but he had become very comfortable benefiting from them. Saturday arrived bright and clear. The wedding venue overlooked a beautiful lake surrounded by oak trees. Guests filled the rows of white chairs. Music drifted through the air. Everything looked exactly the way my fiancé had dreamed it would. Inside the groom's room, Walter stood in front of a mirror adjusting his tie. Daniel was laughing. "Dad, you fixed that tie 15 times. It's still crooked." "It's not. It feels crooked." I couldn't help smiling. The nervousness in the room suddenly felt warm instead of stressful. Then the wedding coordinator stepped inside. "It's time." Everyone stood. Walter looked at me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he reached over and straightened my collar. The gesture was simple, but it felt familiar, comforting, like something a father would do. "You ready?" I nodded. "Yeah." He smiled. "Good." As we stepped outside, I scanned the crowd. Then I saw them. The back row. Dad. Ethan. Both had come after all. Apparently at the last minute. My father looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept much all week. Then his eyes landed on Walter. And everything changed. I watched the realization hit him. Not anger. Not jealousy. Something deeper. The understanding that another man was about to stand where he should have been standing. The music began. Guests rose to their feet. Walter walked beside me toward the front. People smiled. Some looked confused. Others immediately understood. Halfway down the aisle, I glanced toward the back. Dad was staring at us. His eyes never left Walter. I don't think he blinked. For years, he had assumed there would always be another chance. Another birthday. Another holiday. Another conversation. But some moments only happen once. And he was watching this one from the last row. The ceremony itself was beautiful. But the moment everyone remembered happened just before the vows. The officiant smiled. "Before we begin, I'd like to ask a question." She turned toward Walter. "What would you like everyone here to know about Henry?" Walter looked surprised. The guests laughed softly. Even I hadn't known she planned to ask. Walter cleared his throat. Then he spoke. "I've never been very good at speeches." A few people smiled.
But I know this. He looked directly at me. Henry is the kind of man who shows up. The room became quiet. When something breaks, he fixes it. When someone needs help, he helps. When he gives his word, he keeps it. Walter paused. His voice softened. And over the last few years, I've watched him build something most people spend a lifetime searching for. I felt my throat tighten. A life built on character. The room was completely silent.
Walter smiled. I've always believed that being a father isn't about being first. He glanced briefly toward the back row. It's about being present. Then he looked at me again. And son, you've made all of us proud. Son. The word hit me like a freight train. My eyes immediately filled. Around us, guests wiped tears from their faces. Even the officiant looked emotional. When I glanced toward the back row, Dad was crying. Not dramatically, quietly. The way men cry when they're finally forced to face something they've been avoiding for years. A few minutes later, I married the love of my life. The applause echoed across the lake. But people weren't talking about the vows. They were talking about Walter. The reception began. Dinner was served. Stories were shared. Guests kept approaching Walter, shaking his hand, thanking him. Several people assumed he was my father. Walter never corrected them. Not because he wanted recognition, because the truth had become obvious to everyone in the room. He had earned the role. Later in the evening came the dance. Nobody knew about it except me and the DJ. The music stopped. The room quieted. Then the DJ smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to invite Henry and Walter to the dance floor. Walter looked horrified. The entire room burst into laughter. You didn't tell me about this. I grinned. That's why it worked. As the music started, Walter shook his head. I can't dance. You'll survive. The guests formed a circle around us. The song was slow, simple, the kind of song that makes people think about the people they love. About halfway through, Walter stopped talking. I noticed his eyes were wet. Then he looked at me. You know, his voice wavered. My wife would have loved this. The room went completely still. Walter took a breath. After she passed, I thought a lot of chapters in my life were over. He smiled sadly. I never expected to get another son. At that point, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Not mine, not my bride's, not Daniel's, not even my father's. Without thinking, I hugged him, right there in the middle of the dance floor. The guests erupted into applause. It wasn't planned, it wasn't dramatic, it was real. And that's why people cried. After the dance ended, Dad approached me. For once, there were no excuses, no explanations, no attempts to blame Ethan, just honesty. I was wrong. I looked at him quietly. He nodded. I kept telling myself there would always be time to make things right. His voice cracked. I didn't realize I was running out of chances. For years, I had imagined hearing those words. I thought they would feel like victory. Instead, they felt sad. Because regret is painful to witness when it's genuine. Dad looked across the room toward Walter. He did what I should have done. Yes, I said. He nodded. I know. That was all. No argument, no dramatic reconciliation. Some wounds take longer than a single conversation to heal. But for the first time in years, he wasn't hiding from the truth. Ethan left shortly afterward, quietly, without making a scene. For once, everything wasn't about him. And maybe that was good for both of us. As the evening came to an end, I stood outside overlooking the lake. The lights reflected off the water. Guests laughed in the distance. My bride slipped her hand into mine. Behind us, Walter was helping stack chairs, because apparently he couldn't attend an event without helping. I laughed. Then I realized something. For years, I'd spent my life focusing on who hadn't shown up, who hadn't noticed, who hadn't chosen me. Standing there on my wedding night, I finally understood that I'd been looking in the wrong direction. The people who matter aren't always the ones you're born to. Sometimes they're the ones who quietly step forward when everyone else steps back. The ones who stay.
the ones who choose you. And when I think about my wedding now, I don't remember the disappointment. I remember Walter walking beside me. I remember a man who didn't have to show up, a man who simply decided to. And in the end, that's why he'll always be remembered as the man who took my father's place.
Before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Henry made the right decision by letting Walter take his father's place on the most important day of his life? And what would you have done if you were in Henry's shoes? Would you have forgiven your father, or would that door have closed forever? Stories like this remind us that family isn't always the people we're born to. Sometimes it's the people who choose us, stand beside us, and show up when it matters most. Have you ever had someone step into your life and become family, even though you weren't related by blood? If so, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from today. I always enjoy seeing how many different countries and communities come together around these stories. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video. It really helps the channel reach more people who enjoy emotional family stories just like this one. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of the people who show up for you, and remember, sometimes the people who earn the title of family are the ones who never had to, but chose to anyway. I'll see you in the next story.